Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I'm your host in today's episode of the Instagram Live Q&As. Is the 23rd that we have done. Just about at 26, which is 6 months worth, which is pretty crazy to think of how quick that's gone. Coming out this week is Liam Daly from the Australian Garden Podcast and also obviously from Wildco. He's a garden designer. So that's a good episode. And I'm also on their podcast. So him and Nick from Share Design got to both host that podcast. So their episode came out over the weekend, and by the time you're listening to this, Liam's will be out this week. And it's worth looking at his Instagram page as well because he does some pretty cool designs. Like they look really unique. It's got some nice colours in there, so check that out. But the first question is from Andy from Leaf by Leaf. And he said, "Do you charge a percentage on mulch or set a fee per cubic metre? I've heard different methods." So if you've heard different methods, I reckon it's worth giving them both a try if you're not sure what the best way to go about it is, so that you can work out what works best for you, because what works best for one person isn't necessarily going to be the same for everyone. But a maintenance company is probably different to what a construction company does, because we do that as part of our, like in the quotes, I'll put it under garden beds. So I'll have soil and mulch as one sort of garden bed item, and I'll work that out on a square meterage price, which I think is might be $33 a square meter. So that's just what I work. I was a lot less than that, and then when prices went up, my prices went up, so I was a lot less. But there's some things I won't work out on a per square meter or per cubic meter rate, but garden beds is one that I do. It's obviously going to vary depending on what type of mulch you use. Like if you're using a pebble mulch, it's a lot more expensive, probably double the price of what most of the other mulches are. But I reckon at least 95% of the gardens we do have got a composter mulch or normal pine mulch or something like that. So they're all around about the same price. So that price out works out well for me, and that price includes supply and installation of it. And it's also going to vary depending on the access and things like that. So, you got to allow for it. But, it doesn't matter which way you go. It's just whatever works, whatever you're comfortable doing with. And if you're making money on it, then that's fine to do. Glenn Mack said, "Who would have a better lawn, Marty Semkin or Paul Trotter?" I'm not familiar with who Paul Trotter is, but I would guess he would have a better lawn, because I think Marty Semkin works 25 hours a day, so he wouldn't have enough time to look after his lawn. Jen Hathaway said, "What is the best estimating quoting software to use?" I'm not the best person to ask that, because I don't use any at all. I just use a piece of paper and a pen. Every now and then, the old Excel spreadsheet might get a run, but I don't use any of that. But a lot of people use whatever their accounting software is. But I think that's more about just sending out the quote. So it's not so much working out the costs. My original boss had an Excel spreadsheet, which is pretty awesome. So you could put in there, you could work out the material price for for a deck. So if you go to the deck section, it would have stumps, 90x45, decking boards, labor. So you can put in how many stumps you need, how many meters 90x45, and then it would work it out, and then it would give you a figure at the end. So that was a good way to do it, so you could see how much you're spending. But that's kind of how mine works, with a piece of paper and a pen, but I just work it out rather than the spreadsheet working it out. But again, I've mentioned it a few times, and I don't know if it's worth mentioning, because it is a US based software and only works with QuickBooks as far as I'm aware. But Synced Up has got that kind of tool within the app, where in the app you work out your expenses and all that kind of stuff that I've spoken about a fair bit, to work out your hourly rate and how much you should be charging, and then you can work out the cost. So you can do that all within the app. So as I've said a couple of times, it's quite expensive, but it also does a lot of what multiple other apps do. So you pay for a bit of that convenience of not having to pay for other apps and not having to go in and out of other ones. Tim from Space Capsule Garden Co. said, "Why are you not on Dancing with the Stars?" Because I am not famous enough, not as famous as Charlie. I haven't won Best in Show at the Garden Show. I assume, even though I saw he did some promos at the Garden Show, but I assume if I had won Best in Show this year, that's where I would be now on Dancing with the Stars. I assume that's what that was part of the package. But don't have the fame or the talent to dance. So yeah, even at our wedding, we didn't have a dance at all, and I didn't dance once. So yeah, not a dancer. Andrea Uren said, check out Ascora for trade-based quoting. So it's ASCORA. I've never even heard of that one. So that's something worth checking out. Ascora. So yeah, it's the same. Like I said to Andy at the start with the first question about whether you do percentage for mulch or set fee. The same deal with, and I said to do both and see what works best for you. It's the same with quoting programs and all this type of apps. It's good to try them both. I'll try different ones so that then you can work out what works best for you, because what works best for someone else doesn't necessarily work with the same, because not everyone's got the same business or same goals. Outdoor Oasis Landscape said, when will your next stop motion masterpiece be done? Well, it's very kind of you to say that I've done a masterpiece, but I haven't had any time to do one at the moment, but also haven't had any ideas on what I will do next. Thought of doing a crazy paving one because I've got a bit of that coming up, but it sure does take a lot of time. So not in the short term, but if there was some idea that someone's had for me to do, and it was just sounding amazing, then I would probably just do it anyway, even though I don't have time. Because I do enjoy doing them, but nothing in the foreseeable future. Planet Space said, have you ever thought about taking on a co-host for the podcast? I'll nominate Brady from Boutique Timeless Landscapes. I haven't thought about it, but if I was going to take one, I reckon Brady would be a ripper to have on. But it's a coincidental question, because in Liam's chat, which is out at the moment, or if you're listening live, it's out tomorrow. So I mentioned before that him and Nick have got their own podcast, the Australian Garden Podcast. And in the episode, I mentioned to them how when I was a guest on their podcast, I couldn't believe how well they spoke. Like, they weren't speaking over the top of each other, and they were both asking questions. Sort of, yeah, it was like it was planned, but it wasn't planned. It was just similar to mine, where they just sort of ask questions based off your answers. They got some pre-planned questions, but it was really impressive how well they worked together. But I don't think I could do it, because I struggle not talking over the guest, let alone having another person on as well. But Brady would be a lot of fun to have around. So maybe we could even do I could do ones where if the guest recommends someone, when I ask the question at the end, we could both interview that person possibly. But yeah, nothing in the pipeline yet. The Fishing Chippy said, do you think we will see some of the paving attachments to diggers that are used in the States? I reckon if they don't already exist, they would most likely be used on commercial sites first, because they seem to make things a lot more easier to use. Like when you're doing the swims, they try and come up with the most safest way to do things without working physically hard to do it. So they use machines as often as they can to lift things, which is a good thing that a lot of residential landscapers could take on board and work a lot smarter than harder. We just did that this week gone, where we had some massive 200 by 200 mil spotting arm posts that were put into a hole, and I planned on using trolleys and ropes to get it over to the hole, and then just put the bottom in and then stand it up. But then I realised they're way too heavy to lift up. Like, we could have done it, but what we also could have done, which we did, was get an excavator and tie a sling around it and then lift it up with the excavator. So we did that instead, and it was extremely easy. And I didn't do it by myself. I got one of the guys on site every now and then helping me out, just putting the sling around and doing things so I didn't have to get off the excavator. But I could have done it by myself, put the posts in, and I think it worked out they were 170 kilos each. So yeah, using machines is a smart way to do it. And you see it a lot in North America, where they've got suctions on the end of their excavators. And they've even got just backpack suction tools. Pave Tool do sell a lot of these products if you're wanting to look into them. But yeah, they seem to move pavers around a lot. They also seem to use a lot thicker pavers and larger format than what we do. So that would play a part as well. But yeah, it's interesting because a lot of the times I look at North America and feel like they're a lot behind on what we're doing in Australia. But then there's things like that where they seem to be ahead by making things easier. So I reckon we will see them, and that's if they're not already here. So if they are here, they'll get a lot more popular. Robertson Landscapes and Design said, should we take on front fences with auto gates or outsource? That's a good question because I've done both, and the reason for outsourcing is usually because you shouldn't have taken it on in the first place. So they're quite expensive to do. Like when you get, like the reason I did it was I got a quote off a company and it was extremely expensive. I thought there's no way it should cost that much. So I think I can do it for less than that, make good money on it, and then I don't have to rely on another trade. So I did it and then had all sorts of issues with the gate motor. Yeah, just heaps of dramas on that first one we did. So then I think I outsourced the next one, and then I've done a couple as well. If I was doing my own house, I would do it myself. But there's one we've got coming up which I'm outsourcing, and now going forward I'll just outsource because it's just easy to get someone else to do it. It might cost the client more, but that's just what it is. There's no point me losing money or being slower at doing things because I want to save the client money. You've just got to look after yourself sometimes. So it depends on the skills of the people involved, whether you and your guys are capable of working out the gate motors, because there's always troubleshooting with them. I reckon I've called, like there's one particular gate motor we use, a Nice one. I reckon I've called their tech support crew 30 times for a couple of different gates. One of them had to get replaced. So yeah, there's all sorts of issues with that. The thing with if you outsource it, it's also the client's going to call you, and then you've got to contact the guy who you outsourced and hope that they go back there. So yeah, there's pros and cons, but I would outsource it and then hopefully there's no issues with it. And Bert Lush said, what do you lay slabs on? Concrete, cement, semi-wet cement mix? I'm confused. So I think Bert is from the UK, so it's tricky when you're listening to overseas and even sometimes interstate landscapers because everyone's got different terms they use for the same item. And the fact that you've said, what do you lay slabs on is the first example of that, because we lay on slabs. So what I refer to as a slab is a concrete slab, which is underneath the paving that we lay. And again, some people call it flagstone, some people call it paving, some people call it tiles. It's all very confusing. So don't be too surprised that you are confused. So it's wet lay paving that we're talking about. So we'll pour a concrete slab, so the same as like a footpath would be, or a driveway, and then we lay the pavers on that using mortar, so a standard cement wet lay mix. So you mix that up to I don't know if you'd say like a toothpaste kind of consistency, and then lay it on that. Some people lay it on tile adhesive. I've got a question about that later on. But yeah, so we'll pour the concrete slab and then lay it on a mortar base, whether that's natural stone laying on a mortar base or concrete laying on a mortar base. But yeah, that's the way we do it. Because I think in the UK, I've seen they use, I think it's a product called Type 2, which is kind of looks like a stabilized crushed rock. And that's what they lay down over the soil before they lay their pavers on top of that. Terrain Landscape said, how much steel went into your letterbox? Not a huge amount, because a lot of it is all pretty vertical. There's a little bit of overhang on the F's and the E's and the V a little bit. But with the V, I had, so this is the letterbox where it says number 5 that he's talking about. with the V, so that it didn't split apart in the joint. I had a lot of almost like an upside down horseshoe. So that was, so I'd had some mesh going up both sides of the V, and there was like an upside down horseshoe. I think I put 4 of them through there, which was locking the 2 V sides together. There's steel going through them, but it would have been no more than, I'd say, $200 worth of steel in the whole lot. So I suppose there's the footing as well, but there's not much in that either. But I had the vertical bar tied into the Rio in the footing, and then tied some Rio to that for the letter above it. But it's not going to go anywhere. And then I put some mesh in the top as well, like some 25 or 25 mil mesh in there, just to tie the corners together. Matt York from Budding Design said, how do you ensure you're getting quality soil with appropriate pH, salt levels, etc.? I don't, to be honest. We've just always used the soil that's available from all the different garden supplies around the place, and have never had an issue with it. If we've ever had to, we've never had to adjust any. We've never, and like some of the products we have done, the growth on them is phenomenal, and it's not like certain suburbs where we get it from one supplier is better than other ones where we get it from a different supplier. So yeah, I've never had any issues with it. Like, we don't use any. We get it from landscape supply yards. We don't get screen topsoil or anything like that from where you see some of that selling for super cheap. I did that once, and there was just weeds popping up here everywhere. So never do that again. So just using garden blend mixes from the different garden supply places is all I do. We don't test it or anything. So I don't do, like I've mentioned a few times, I should do. It'd be good to do more on soil prep. So that's something we could look into doing more. But it's something that, as long as there's no problem, I don't look into it too much. But it's a good question, but yeah, like, if you don't have problems with the plants that you're going into the soil, then I can't see why you would need to look into it too much more. But that could be one of those 1% things that has you above other people. And even though I think my gardens that we build look good and the growth is good, maybe that could be better, and that could be a way of going about doing it. Rich Earth Landscape said, Vectorworks versus Landworks CAD, which do you think is better? So it's tricky to answer, because I've used Landworks CAD for about 14 years, I think, or maybe 15 years, and haven't used Vectorworks. I've done a couple of training sessions with Vectorworks, and that looks better. But I reckon if I did, like, the only training I've ever done with Landworks CAD was 15 years ago. So I reckon if I did a training course in it now, they'd be able to show me things I haven't been using for 15 years that would make things a lot easier and would look better. But I see a lot more people using Vectorworks, and I see the designs that a landscape architect is producing, and they look a lot better than what I was producing with Landworks CAD. And I haven't seen many people doing the same level of presentation, the creativity in it, using Landworks CAD. I think because it's a CAD program, it could be a bit more, I don't know, engineering related potentially. So it's not as, not as creative, but that could just be the ones that I've seen that are all Vectorworks based versus Landworks CAD. So yeah, again, could be, it's whatever works best for you. So if you can make amazing designs using Landworks CAD but don't know how to use Vectorworks, then there's no real reason to change, and vice versa. Evergreen GL Solutions said, how do you manage your wet days? Try and get something done on site, shed day, or time catch-up hours? I don't know if it means with the last one, time catch-up hours, if that means if it rains for half a day on Monday, then you work say an hour extra every day for the rest of the week to make up for that time. So we don't do that. So we just, if there's something that can be done in the shed, that's my preference. because it's something like you're still working at 100% efficiency. You're still doing something that needs to get done, and you can do it out of the rain. But I certainly don't like getting wet. There could be one coming up tomorrow, actually. It's supposed to be 8 mil of rain. But there's times where you've just got to get stuff done. So that could be one of those times tomorrow where we'll just be working a little bit. And it's, if you know it's going to rain all day, you could just plan on working for a few hours, because at least that few hours is better than nothing. But you've also got to take into account, is that going to do any damage? Like if you're walking through garden beds when it's raining, you're going to compact the soil, which is obviously not ideal. And the same deal if you're paving, or if you're certainly not going to be grouting. If you're paving, it can be, again, no good, because it can weaken the mortar. So even though the pavers might stay where they are, it's still water getting in there and underneath. So there's one thing to work through the wet, but it can also be a bad thing to be doing. I'm not just saying that because I hate working in the rain and don't want to do it, but there are negatives to doing it other than just getting wet. And just the amount of mess you make as well is just horrendous. No, I don't. So that's also why, like, I've only got 2 employees at the moment on site, so it's not too hard for me to just pull the pin and send them home, and I can just go back to the office and get a lot of work done, because I've always got office work that I can do. So it's easy for me to do that. So, but I also don't want to I'm not going to make them work in the rain while I go back in the office, even though, yeah, I should, but that's just not what I can do. So, or not what I do. So not all rain days are the same. So if it's going to be light rain, you might just work through it. If you've got a concrete pour that you've got to get done the next day, you might just soldier on. But yeah, just do a reverse rain dance. Jones Landscape said, which was the hardest letter to make out of your 5? So talking about the letterbox as well. It was definitely the V, because with the letterbox, I was troweling all the faces. It wasn't burnished or anything, just troweled to a smooth finish. And I, in a perfect world, because the V is on an angle facing out, there's a bit of weight trying to pull it down, which is why I put those upside down horseshoe shaped bits of steel on to hold it together so it didn't crack in the middle or collapse. So ideally I would have had boxing underneath it or formwork supporting it for a week while it cured, and then take that away. But if I did that, I wouldn't have been able to trowel the base on the underside, which you're going to see. So what my plan was to trowel that, or to strip the boxing and trowel it, and then if the V collapsed, then I'll just have to do it the other way and support it. But if you leave the formwork on, then you'll see air bubbles in there, which I didn't want to do. You can put a coat of cement render on there to make it look smooth, but then you'd have to put that over the whole lot so it all looked consistent. So what my perfect world scenario was to be able to trowel it, and it didn't collapse. So what happened when I stripped the formwork was I had so there's the front, the outside, the inside, and the back. So I took them all off, and then I took the front off, troweled that, took the inside off, troweled that, took the outside off, troweled that, and it was all going well. And then when I was taking the back off, that's when it cracked in the joint, because I was being a bit too aggressive trying to get it off. But I think it might have done it anyway. But I forgot about how fragile it was, so I was going a bit too hard on it. But because it was only a minor crack, and I took it off early enough, I was able to work the concrete and fill the crack up. And it's been 2 weeks since then, and the crack hasn't reappeared. It certainly dries the slowest on the joint. So it's obviously hadn't completely filled up that crack. So it might come back in the future, but it's certainly not going to be as big as what it was. It might just be a hairline, and it won't bother me too much, because I think it's better having that there rather than seeing the pinholes, air holes that would have been on the outside. So definitely with the V, that was the trickiest letter. Life of Bow River said, "Are you a fan of Dream Gardens?" I haven't watched it for a while, but I am a fan of it. So I did enjoy watching it in the early days, because I liked the different projects that were on there. So I remember Georgia Harper had one on, might have even been the second episode, and that was like a $400,000 project with some massive retaining walls and had a pool in there. It was all really, it was a lot of concrete and really modern. And then there was one that was like a country garden, like a kitchen garden kind of look on there. So there was some good different size of gardens, and it was also good showing the amount of time it takes to do and the cost involved. So I reckon it was, I loved it actually. I don't watch a lot of TV, so I haven't watched it, but if I ever had spare time, I would probably go on and binge watch a few episodes of that, because I reckon it's a good show. Matt Borland said, do you run your business from home, for example, vehicles and equipment? Another coincidental timing question, because I've got another episode coming out, because I've got 3 in the bank at the moment and do another one Tuesday, but an episode coming out in a couple of weeks with Dan from Night Landscape. So I was talking to him about that, and he doesn't have a shed, but he has had one in the past. So we were talking about that in that episode. And I was just thinking, as he was saying that he doesn't have one, I was just thinking, oh, that's like 30 grand a year I could save by not having one. Because so I do have one, and spend about that when you take into account the rent and all the outgoings as well. So it'd be nice not to have it, but I've got too much stuff and too many vehicles, and that's just the way I run the business. Certainly don't have any room at home, but that's just one of the things that you build into your overhead. So that's why what one person is charging is irrelevant to what you need to charge for your services. So if I've got to pay $30,000 a year to cover the cost of a shed and all the outgoings for it, and this person next to me doesn't have to charge that, well, then they don't need to, what I'm charging, they don't need to charge. And what they're charging, if I charge that, I won't make any money, because I've got to pay for more things than what they do. So that's why you shouldn't worry too much about what other people are charging. So the person who doesn't have one, they can charge what I'm charging and just make more money. So there's no reason you can't do that. But it's just, a good example of why your overheads make a big difference on what you should be charging. Yard Landscape said, do your employees listen to your podcast? I know that my two landscapers don't, because not everyone is as hardcore fan of landscaping as what I certainly am, and other people just don't listen to podcasts. There's a lot of people who don't, like the majority. I think my landscape architect, she's definitely listened to a few. Don't know if she's listened to everyone, but it doesn't bother me if they do or don't. The two landscapers don't. That's why I talk so much shit about them, because they don't listen to the podcast. That's all. They don't listen to the podcast. Mark from Grow Man's Coaching said, do you want to join my Dry July group? So I don't drink, so that'd be too easy for me. But I've seen other people do, like, if they don't drink, they might do no sugar for July, which that'd be too much of a challenge for me. So I won't be doing that. But that's, if you are looking to do Dry July, that is an awesome thing to do with. You could join Mark's group, so from Grow Men's Coaching and also from InStyle Paving, because Mark's a landscaper. So rather than just doing it by yourself, you could be part of his group, and then you can get support, and it's someone else who knows what you're doing as well. So he understands what it's like to do a concrete pour on a Friday and have a beer, and then knows what it's like to then not want to do that when he decided to stop drinking. So he'd be a good person to go through that with. So Mark from Grow Men's Coaching. Timeless Landscaping Projects said, what's your preferred tile adhesive for natural stone paving? Also a timely question, because I am going to be doing my driveway in a herringbone pattern using limestone paving. So we don't do a lot of tile adhesive on paving. Like, we'll do a lot of walling stuff. When we're using walling, I'll use the Marpe, what is it? Carabon Plus with isolastic on there. That's pretty rock hard once that goes off. But yeah, we don't have. I don't know if we've done any on a paving on a floor surface. But I asked a tiling mate of mine who's what I should use for the driveway. Showed him the paver I was using, and I think it was Ardex. There was a lot, because I haven't used it before. I don't know the products very well, but it might be like a X18 or X20 with a S90 additive or something like that. A lot of numbers that sound similar to that in there. If you know all the Ardex range, you might have a clue what I'm talking about. But I would say it was an Ardex product with an additive in there. So that's what I'm going to give a try with that. My last question from Tip Top Blinds. Do you specify shading solutions for your clients' outdoor spaces? So we do for verandas. Most people call them pergolas, but technically they're a veranda, so just an undercover area. But we haven't done a lot of what I assume you would sell, being a company called Tip Top Blinds. But that's something that's what I find with designing is when you start doing it, you start with the basics and then you're always just adding in different things as you come across them. So, and then it's like with, you might design a garden which has got lawn and plants when you're first starting out, and then you might then someone says they want a deck, so then you add a deck or paving to your repertoire, and then you might incorporate a bit of crazy paving into it to make it a bit more complex. And you're just continually refining what you include in your designs. And then you might include like a barbecue bench, like a built-in barbecue bench with cabinets. Then you might start designing pergolas. So you're always just increasing what's included within your designs. That's what I find. And then you might find you're adding in sculptures in the garden as well, because someone asks for that and you think, oh yeah, that looks good. So then you might start including that. And I think that might be the case with blinds, outdoor blinds and shading solutions. I was just talking to a friend of ours today about what I was going to be doing with our entertaining area, and they were talking about how they want to have outdoor blinds on their entertaining area. And then we were actually talking about how expensive they are, because we've done a couple of projects where they were included, but there's different varieties, and then they might not be as much anymore. But yeah, that's something that we don't do a lot of, but it's something we'll be looking to add to the repertoire. So, because I do like the outdoor blinds more so than the horizontal shading solutions. I like them to be a bit more fixed, but the outdoor blinds are good because they can block wind, and they look pretty good as well. But that was the last question. Had 19 questions today, so that was a pretty decent episode to get through those questions. So thank you very much to everyone who submitted one of the questions. We'll put it up again next week. We'll definitely keep going until we get to at least 26 episodes of the live. So that's 6 months worth, and then go on from there. And it was there, Liam Daly, out at the moment or tomorrow, depending on what time you're listening to this, from Wild Co Garden Design. And we'll see you next week.